Welcome to our channel where we uncover the untold stories of history's most fascinating figures. Today we delve into the life of Alva Vanderbilt, a woman who shaped the Gilded Age and elevated her family to the pinnacle of New York society. But behind her grand mansions, glittering balls, and calculated social triumphs lies a complex and often controversial legacy. From her relentless ambition to her shocking scandals, Alva Vanderbilt was far more than a socialite. She was a force to be reckoned with. Join us as we explore how she made the Vanderbilts a name that would echo through history. Alva Erskine Belmont's childhood paints a picture of contradictions, privilege and hardship, luxury and loss, that would shape her into the formidable woman who later dominated the Gilded Age. Born into a wealthy Southern family in Mobile, Alabama, in 1853, Alva's early years were marked by an opulence that belied the fragility of her family's fortunes. Her parents, Murray Forbes Smith and Phoebe Ann Desha, were determined to elevate their status, instilling in Alva a sharp awareness of social hierarchies from an early age. Alva's childhood may have seemed idyllic at first glance. The Smith family enjoyed summers in Newport, Rhode Island, a playground for America's elite. Here, Alva mingled with the children of established old money families, including her lifelong friend Consuelo, whose aristocratic background fascinated Alva and ignited her own aspirations. Alva's parents spared no expense in exposing her to the trappings of wealth and privilege, surrounding her with tutors, lavish homes, and glittering social events. Yet beneath this glittering exterior lay an undercurrent of insecurity, as the Smith family was, by comparison, new money, a fact that would haunt Alva throughout her life. Even as a young girl, Alva exhibited a tenacious spirit. Family anecdotes suggest that she was headstrong and fiercely determined to stand out among her peers. This ambition, however, was often tempered by the rigid expectations placed on women of her class. Alva was groomed to be a proper Southern belle, trained in etiquette, music, and the art of charming conversation. But these lessons were not enough to quell her hunger for something more substantial than just a wealthy husband and a quiet life. Alva's world changed dramatically at the age of 17. The death of her mother in 1871 was a devastating blow, not only emotionally, but also financially. Phoebe Ann Desha had been the linchpin of the family, managing the household and maintaining appearances that masked their precarious financial situation. Without her, the Smith family's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. Shortly after her mother's passing, the family's fortune took a significant downturn. The economic instability of the post-Civil War South had already strained their finances, but the loss of Phoebe's social connections and management skills proved catastrophic. Suddenly, the privileged life Alva had known was slipping through her fingers. The once proud Smith family was reduced to navigating the social scene with far less wealth to back their aspirations. For Alva, this was a turning point. Struggling with the dual burdens of grief and near poverty, she faced the harsh reality that she could no longer rely on her family's name or fortune to secure her future. Yet, rather than succumbing to despair, Alva channeled her frustration into determination. She began to view marriage not as a romantic endeavor, but as a strategic move, a way to reclaim the wealth and status her family had lost. But the loss of wealth wasn't Alva's only obstacle. As a young woman in a world where beauty and wealth were a woman's most powerful assets, Alva faced a harsh reality. She lacked both. Descriptions of her appearance were less than kind, calling her homely and square-chinned. Yet, anyone who underestimated her during this time was making a grave mistake. Alva was cunning and ambitious, traits that would enable her to orchestrate one of the greatest social successes of her era. Despite her hardships, Alva maintained connections with her influential socialite friends. One day, her friend Consuelo Iznaga introduced her to William Keesum Vanderbilt, the grandson of the immensely wealthy railroad magnate Cornelius Vanderbilt. Alva, knowing she could not rely on her looks, used her sharp wit and intelligence to captivate the easygoing and affluent William. Her confidence and charm quickly won him over, and Alva ensured their relationship progressed swiftly. In 1875, Alva married William in a grand New York City wedding, officially becoming a Vanderbilt. The couple went on to have 3 children, a daughter named Consuelo, after Alva's close friend, and 2 sons, Willie Jr. and Harold. Through sheer determination and strategic social maneuvering, Alva secured her place in one of America's wealthiest and most powerful families, marking the beginning of her ascent as a force to be reckoned with in the Gilded Age. Alva Vanderbilt's new life seemed perfect on the surface. She even acquired a massive stone mansion on Fifth Avenue, known as the Petit Chateau, a symbol of wealth and power. However, behind the beautiful facade, trouble was brewing. Despite her lavish surroundings, Alva quickly realized that something important was missing. The Vanderbilts, for all their immense fortune, could not purchase what mattered most in elite New York society: acceptance by the old money aristocracy. At the time, New York's social hierarchy was dominated by a select group of long-established families who prided themselves on inherited wealth and tradition. They looked down on the so-called new money families, like the Vanderbilts, who had built their fortunes through industrial enterprises. Alva, accustomed to manipulating circumstances to achieve her goals, found herself stung by their disdain. The rejection became deeply personal when Caroline Astor, the symbolic leader of old New York society, publicly snubbed her. Mrs. Astor made her disdain clear by refusing to make daytime social calls to Alva, a subtle yet unmistakable signal that she did not consider Alva or the Vanderbilts worthy of recognition. This deliberate exclusion sent shock waves through society and highlighted the rigid divide between old and new wealth. Yet true to form, Alva was not one to accept defeat. As always, she began strategizing how to engineer the outcome she desired, determined to break into the upper echelons of society no matter the obstacles in her way. Alva's ability to command respect wasn't confined to the confines of high society balls or social gatherings. She was a master of turning personal slights into opportunities for self-assertion. One anecdote recounts how, while traveling in Paris, she was belittled by a prominent French count who referred to her as just another nouveau riche American. Rather than reacting with anger, Alva took an unconventional route. She secretly enlisted the services of a skilled fencing master, training rigorously for several weeks. Once prepared, she hosted a private gathering where she invited the count. At the event, Alva dramatically challenged him to a duel, presenting a pair of fencing swords. The count, caught off guard, declined and issued a formal apology to her in front of the esteemed guests. Alva reportedly responded with a sharp wit, stating, "Respect isn't inherited, monsieur, it's earned." This audacious act not only silenced her critic, but also solidified her reputation as a woman who commanded respect on her own terms. Alva Vanderbilt was ready to unleash her full cunning. The ambitious Alva knew that if the Vanderbilts were ever going to gain the respect they craved, it would start with winning over Caroline Astor. With this in mind, she devised a brilliant strategy. Alva planned the grandest ball of the century at her opulent chateau, sending out 1,300 invitations and strategically scheduling the soiree right after Lent, marking the end of the social season, when no other events would compete for attention. However, this was only the first step of her scheme. To ensure her event became the talk of the elite, Alva designed a spectacle so lavish that everyone who mattered would clamor for an invitation, Caroline Astor and her family included. But Alva's masterstroke came when she purposefully left out one key name, Astor's daughter, Carrie. Alva justified this exclusion by citing etiquette. Mrs. Astor had never formally visited her, and it would be impolite to invite someone she didn't know personally. This calculated snub was a stroke of genius. The move forced Caroline Astor's hand. Realizing the weight of being excluded from such an anticipated event, Mrs. Astor broke tradition and finally called on Alva Vanderbilt, symbolically acknowledging the Vanderbilts as part of New York's social elite. The triumph was monumental. Even Mrs. Astor admitted, "The time has come for the Vanderbilts." It was Alva's victory, a single maneuver that shattered the rigid hierarchy of old New York society. But Alva's success came with complications. Her legendary ball may have cemented the Vanderbilts' place in the upper echelons, but it also stirred new rivalries. Her most personal and bitter feud was with her sister-in-law, Alice Vanderbilt, who was married to her husband William's brother. Unlike the public clash with Mrs. Astor, this conflict was intimate and deeply rooted. Alice, known for her extreme snobbery, she famously refused to speak to her own chauffeurs, was determined to outdo Alva at every turn. This rivalry ensured that Alva's social battles were far from over. On the evening of Alva Vanderbilt's much-anticipated ball on March 26, 1883, the streets outside her chateau were bustling with onlookers long before sunset. Crowds gathered, eager to catch a glimpse of New York's elite in their extravagant attire. Alva, determined to dazzle, donned a lavish Venetian noblewoman costume, complete with birds as props to perfect the effect. She had planned every detail meticulously, expecting this night to be her ultimate triumph after securing the Vanderbilts' place in society. But her victory lap was interrupted in the most shocking way. When Alva's sister-in-law, Alice Vanderbilt, arrived, Alva must have been floored. Alice, ever determined to steal the spotlight, completely upstaged Alva by wearing a groundbreaking costume designed to resemble the newly popular electric light. The press was enraptured, lavishing attention on Alice's bold choice, while Alva's painstakingly curated ball became secondary to the spectacle of Alice's audacious outfit. Despite their rivalry, the two women maintained a veneer of civility, even if their exchanges were laced with subtle barbs. However, Alva's next challenges were far more intense and personal. Known for her sharp intellect and strong will, she had always been a force to be reckoned with. But motherhood brought out a darker, more controlling side. Alva ran her household with an iron grip, reserving her most rigid discipline for her daughter, Consuelo. Her methods were chillingly extreme. For instance, when Alva felt Consuelo's posture was not perfect, she took drastic measures to correct it. Alva forced her daughter to wear a steel rod to ensure perfect posture. But her methods went far beyond this relentless, invisible torment. She often resorted to physical abuse whenever young Consuelo failed to follow her instructions to the letter. Alva's weapon of choice was disturbingly unconventional, a riding crop, which she would wield at a moment's notice. Yet her control wasn't limited to physical domination. Alva sought to dominate Consuelo mentally as well, rarely allowing her daughter to express her own opinions. As Consuelo grew older and began to yearn for self-expression, Alva tightened her grip even further. She insisted on choosing every detail of Consuelo's attire, and when her daughter dared to object, Alva coldly snapped, "I do the thinking. You do as you're told." This toxic dynamic would eventually lead both mother and daughter into deep emotional turmoil. By the 1890s, Alva had achieved everything she had ever wanted. She even coerced her husband into purchasing multiple yachts, one aptly named Alva, and earned a reputation for her obsession with building grand mansions. According to one observer, she thrived on being knee-deep in mortar, yet her endless pursuit of status and control was insatiable. When Alva looked at Consuelo, she saw not just her daughter, but the embodiment of something she herself lacked. Critics often remarked on Alva's somewhat coarse appearance, likening her to the merchant roots of the Vanderbilt family. In stark contrast, Consuelo had blossomed into a stunning young woman, her oval face and elegant, slender figure epitomizing the aristocratic ideal of beauty at the time. However, Alva didn't view her daughter's beauty with pride or affection. Instead, it became another tool for her to exploit. Alva saw Consuelo as a golden ticket to gain even more power through the marriage market, and her methods were nothing short of ruthless. Although Alva had already climbed to the top of New York society, one thing still eluded her: a noble title. With her daughter's beauty and substantial dowry, Alva quickly decided that Consuelo must marry into aristocracy, ideally becoming a duchess. It didn't take long for her to orchestrate a calculated meeting between Consuelo and Charles Spencer Churchill, the Duke of Marlborough, and owner of the prestigious Blenheim estate. However, what Alva envisioned as a fairy tale quickly unraveled into a nightmare. From the outside, the Duke seemed like the perfect match, but the deal Alva struck was deeply flawed. Financially destitute, the Duke agreed to marry Consuelo purely for monetary gain. Adding to the tragedy, he was in love with another woman at the time of his proposal. None of this mattered to Alva, who was fixated on securing the title of Duchess for her daughter. To seal the deal, the Vanderbilt family offered a staggering dowry worth $77 million in today's terms. But before the wedding invitations were even sent, trouble erupted. While Alva was busy molding Consuelo into the future Duchess of Marlborough, she overlooked one critical detail. Consuelo was already in love with someone else. She had fallen for an American named Winthrop Rutherford and had no intention of marrying the Duke. Determined to escape the arranged marriage, Consuelo even planned to elope with Rutherford. This defiance sent Alva into a frenzy, as she was unaccustomed to her daughter standing up to her after years of strict control. Alva's reaction was swift and severe. She locked Consuelo in a room and made chilling threats against Rutherford's life, vowing to relent only if her daughter agreed to marry the Duke. Despite the emotional and physical intimidation, Consuelo held her ground for some time, refusing to yield to her mother's demands. But Alva was not one to back down. When threats failed to break her daughter's resolve, she escalated her manipulation to an entirely new level of cruelty. Alva Vanderbilt wasn't about to let anyone, not even her daughter Consuelo, derail her carefully crafted plans. Determined to secure a prestigious marriage for her daughter, Alva resorted to extreme measures. She feigned severe illness, claiming the stress of the situation was literally killing her. This emotional manipulation finally broke Consuelo's resistance, and the young woman agreed to the match her mother had chosen. But as they say, be careful what you wish for. On November 6, 1895, Alva's schemes culminated in Consuelo's marriage to the Duke of Marlborough. To society, it appeared to be the ultimate triumph, with Alva achieving her goal of making her daughter a duchess. Yet behind the scenes, the story was far from a fairy tale. Reports claimed that Consuelo cried behind her veil throughout the entire ceremony, while Alva should have been reveling in her success. The truth was more complicated. By the time the wedding took place, Alva was caught up in a scandal of her own, one that would shake her position in society to its core. Just months before Consuelo's high-profile wedding, Alva made an announcement that sent shock waves through New York. She was divorcing William Vanderbilt. This was no small matter. Not only was William the source of Alva's extravagant lifestyle, but divorce in the New York elite was almost unheard of at the time. The news ignited a frenzy of gossip throughout Manhattan, and Alva's social standing plummeted overnight. The fallout was swift and merciless. When Alva attended church following her announcement, the other women coldly ignored her, effectively shunning her from their circle. Invitations to society's most exclusive events dried up, leaving her isolated from the world she had once ruled. For Alva, the divorce wasn't just a personal decision, it was a societal reckoning. Whispers about the reasons for the split only fueled the drama, with many speculating that her marriage had been far from the picture-perfect union it seemed to be. For Alva, who had built her life on ambition and calculated social maneuvers, the stakes had never been higher. Alva and her husband William Vanderbilt had always been an ill-matched pair, their incompatibility apparent to anyone who knew them. But their differences went far beyond personality clashes. William was, by most accounts, a shameless philanderer. His most infamous affair was with Nellie Neely, a much younger mistress notorious in European social circles. Yet it wasn't just his unfaithfulness that enraged Alva. It was the brazen way he flaunted it. William made no effort to hide his relationship with Nellie, parading her around openly and casually, disrespecting his wife in the process. When Alva finally confronted him, William reportedly didn't bother denying the affair, which only added fuel to the fire. Manhattan's social scene buzzed with gossip, but the situation soon became even more scandalous. Some contemporaries speculated that William's infidelities were not just a matter of lust, but part of a calculated ploy. According to this theory, William was so eager to escape his marriage without the stigma of filing for divorce that he hired a woman to pose as his mistress, hoping to provoke Alva into initiating the separation. Regardless of the truth behind this theory, there was a deeper and more painful reason driving their eventual split. William would come to regret his actions deeply, but by then, Alva had already begun her revenge. After years of painstakingly climbing the social ladder and elevating the Vanderbilts to the pinnacle of New York's elite, Alva was not about to let William's betrayals overshadow her achievements. Her response to their divorce would go far beyond ending their marriage. It would solidify her legacy as a force to be reckoned with. Once Alva decided to divorce William, she abandoned all pretense of civility. She swiftly cut him out of their children's lives, asserting total control. On what should have been a joyous day, Consuelo's wedding, marking her as a duchess, Alva went so far as to disinvite nearly everyone from the Vanderbilt side of the family. Though William walked his daughter down the aisle to maintain appearances, it was purely for show. Alva insisted he leave the church immediately after fulfilling this ceremonial role, signaling the beginning of her campaign of retribution. William had severely underestimated Alva's capacity for vengeance, and she wasted no time proving it. One of William's closest friends, Oliver Belmont, an American banker and frequent companion on the Vanderbilts' yacht trips and social outings, became central to her revenge. Alva and Oliver's relationship had sparked rumors for nearly a decade, with whispers suggesting it began as early as 1888 during one of those yacht trips aboard Alva's prized vessel. Scandalous stories swirled, including one claimed that William had once come home to find Oliver hiding in a closet in the family's home. Such behavior was considered a grave breach of decorum for Alva. While William's own extramarital affairs were socially tolerated, Alva was expected to remain virtuous. Yet William's reaction to the rumors was far from outrage. Instead, he appeared almost indifferent. viewing Alva's indiscretions as convenient justification for his own. This casual dismissal of her infidelity might have eased the tension temporarily, but Alva's announcement of their divorce shifted the dynamic entirely. Alva's decision to end the marriage was just the first step in her calculated plan. Less than a year after their divorce was finalized, she delivered the ultimate blow to the Vanderbilt family. In January 1896, Alva ensured her revenge was both personal and public, completing her retribution in a way that left no doubt as to her intentions. After her divorce from William Vanderbilt, Alva secured a substantial settlement, including several massive assets. But she didn't stop there. Just weeks after Consuelo's wedding, Alva herself remarried, this time to Oliver Belmont. On the surface, Belmont seemed like an equal, if not an upgrade, to her previous husband. He was nearly as wealthy and influential as Vanderbilt, but beneath the surface he came with serious flaws. Belmont, much like William, had a history of abusive tendencies and an aversion to family life. His first marriage had begun with physical altercations and ended with him abandoning his wife and child. Alva's marriage to Belmont marked a notable shift in her personality and values. During her years with Vanderbilt, she had adhered strictly to the role of a conservative society wife, playing by the unspoken rules of her elite circle. But Belmont was a progressive for his time, even running a liberal magazine called Verdict. Alva, influenced by his outlook, began to loosen her previously rigid beliefs. This transformation would have far-reaching consequences for her life and legacy. One of the biggest cracks in Alva's carefully constructed world came in 1906, when the marriage she had arranged for Consuelo fell apart. Consuelo and the Duke of Marlborough had been mismatched from the beginning, and years of infidelities and fundamental incompatibility had taken their toll. That year, the couple officially separated, triggering an avalanche of legal and social fallout. While Consuelo's split rocked British high society, Alva's reaction was even more shocking. Instead of expressing anger or frustration over the failed union, Alva surprised everyone by supporting her daughter. When Consuelo sought to annul her marriage, she turned to Alva for help, asking her to testify in court about the unsuitability of the match. Alva's response left observers stunned. Not only did she agree to testify, but her confession during the proceedings floored everyone present. When it was her turn to take the stand, Alva admitted that she had coerced Consuelo into marrying the Duke. Even more astonishingly, she expressed regret, acknowledging that she had been wrong to force her daughter into the arrangement. This rare moment of vulnerability from the famously calculating Alva marked a turning point, revealing a depth of humanity beneath her ironclad exterior. As Alva Vanderbilt confided to an investigator, "I have always had absolute power over my daughter." It seemed a shift was beginning in the formidable former Mrs. Vanderbilt. Yet a profound change was coming for her as well. Alva and her second husband, Oliver Belmont, had long been prominent figures in New York's elite, and most assumed they would continue to preside over their social sphere indefinitely. However, in the summer of 1908, their reign came to an abrupt and tragic end. That year, Oliver was suddenly struck with a severe case of appendicitis. The illness progressed swiftly and mercilessly, leaving little time for intervention. Before anyone could fully grasp the gravity of the situation, Alva's second husband was gone. True to her penchant for grandeur, Alva ensured Oliver was buried in the Grand Belmont Mausoleum at Woodlawn Cemetery. But no amount of ceremony could disguise the stark reality. For the first time in decades, Alva was alone, a single woman navigating a world she had once ruled alongside powerful men. However, Alva was not one to retreat into grief or obscurity. Following Oliver's death, she underwent one of the most extraordinary transformations of her life. Defying the conventions of her previous social climbing and opulent lifestyle, Alva emerged as a passionate advocate for women's suffrage. Her involvement in the movement marked a dramatic shift in her focus, as she became one of the leading voices in the fight for women's rights. This new chapter also brought a revival of an old relationship. Since testifying on her daughter Consuelo's behalf during the girl's divorce, Alva and Consuelo had grown significantly closer. The once fractured bond between mother and daughter was now one of mutual support and collaboration. Consuelo not only helped Alva with her suffragette efforts, but also provided her mother with companionship and stability. Together they shared a peaceful and fulfilling period of their lives, forging a partnership that contrasted sharply with Alva's earlier, more tumultuous years. Alva's domineering influence, which once forced others into submission, left long-lasting scars on her family. The effects of her oppressive parenting style echoed across generations in unsettling ways. Perhaps it was a Vanderbilt curse, but few of Alva's descendants found happiness in their marriages. Her eldest son, William Vanderbilt II, entered what was considered a prestigious union with socialite Virginia Graham Fair. However, after a decade and 3 children, their marriage also ended in divorce. By the 1930s, the Vanderbilt family, once synonymous with unparalleled wealth and power, found themselves facing a sobering reality. Their gilded empire, built on the backbone of the American railroad industry, was beginning to crumble under the weight of changing times and personal strife. Alva Vanderbilt, a woman who had clawed her way to the pinnacle of New York society, bore witness to both the zenith and the slow unraveling of her family's fortunes. She had experienced it all: luxury, scandal, triumph, and heartbreak. And now, in the twilight of her life, the signs of decline were unmistakable. Alva's ex-husband, William Vanderbilt, whose wealth had initially propelled her ascent, passed away in 1920. His death marked more than just the loss of a significant figure in her life. It was a symbol of the fading influence of the Vanderbilt name. The vast railroad fortune that had cemented their place among America's elite was beginning to dwindle, eroded by mismanagement, shifting economic landscapes, and the family's own extravagant lifestyles. For Alva, a woman who had spent her life meticulously curating her social standing, this decline must have felt like a poignant irony. As the family's financial and social power waned, so too did Alva's once indomitable energy. In 1932, after years of relentless ambition and unyielding control, she faced a battle she could not win: the frailty of age. That spring, Alva suffered a debilitating stroke, an event that underscored her vulnerability after decades of projecting strength. For a woman who had spent her life bending circumstances to her will, the limitations imposed by her health were a stark and humbling contrast. In January 1933, at the age of 80, Alva Vanderbilt passed away, leaving behind a complex legacy. Her death marked the end of an era, not just for her family, but for a world that had been defined by the grandeur and excess of the Gilded Age. Alva's life had been a testament to the heights that determination and ambition could achieve, but it also served as a cautionary tale about the costs of relentless pursuit of power. Even in her final years, Alva's influence was undeniable. She had redefined what it meant to be a woman in high society, transforming herself from a Southern outsider into one of the most formidable figures in New York's elite. Her advocacy for women's rights, though late in her life, hinted at the depth of her character and her willingness to evolve. But as her life came to a close, so too did the Vanderbilt dynasty's golden era. By the 1940s, the family's vast wealth was in free fall, and the dominance they had once enjoyed became little more than a memory. Alva's passing symbolized the end of a chapter, not just for her family, but for a broader societal shift away from the opulence and excess of the Gilded Age. Her story, however, continues to fascinate, offering a window into a time of immense transformation, ambition, and complexity. By the 21st century, the legacy of their empire had faded, leaving behind a history overshadowed by the dark secrets Alva carried to her grave. Although Alva Vanderbilt eventually climbed to the pinnacle of New York society, her origins were far removed from the northeastern elite. While it's clear that Alva grew up surrounded by wealth, her family's fortune had a dark foundation. They made their money in cotton, profiting off the labor of enslaved African Americans. Shockingly, this wasn't even the most troubling aspect of her upbringing. Alva once admitted that, as a child in pre-abolition Alabama, she found enjoyment in tormenting the children of the people her family enslaved. This disturbing revelation casts her later advocacy for equality, particularly for women, in a far more complex and troubling light. Alva's high-profile divorce from William Vanderbilt made headlines worldwide, but the real reasons behind their separation remained a mystery for years. Beyond the public scandals and William's numerous infidelities, rumors swirled about a much deeper betrayal. It was whispered that William didn't stop at his extramarital affair with Nellie Neustretter. He also allegedly seduced Alva's childhood best friend, Consuelo Naga. If these rumors are true, it's hardly surprising that Alva eventually reached her breaking point and decided to end the marriage. Thank you for joining us today. If you've enjoyed these stories, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible narratives. Stay tuned, because we'll be back soon with more fascinating tales. Until next time,